John Miller had always believed that a home was not just walls and a roof. To him, it was safety, laughter, and family. After serving in the Marine Corps for 15 years, through storms and battles across the ocean, he returned to his hometown in Virginia with one dream: to give his daughter Emma the life he never had. The small neighborhood looked perfect when he first moved in. Clean streets, tall green trees, and houses painted in soft colors. It was the kind of place where children rode their bicycles without fear, and neighbors waved while cutting their grass. Or at least, that was how it looked at the start. Emma was 12 now, full of life and kindness. She loved drawing chalk pictures on the driveway, singing Taylor Swift songs in her room, and helping the elderly neighbor, Mrs. Carter, carry groceries inside. She had the heart of gold that John admired every single day. But one morning, something strange broke the peace. John opened the front door to get the morning paper, only to see a bright yellow letter taped to his door. The bold black letters across the top read, "Notice of Violation, Homeowners Association." His heart sank a little. He tore it off, opened the envelope, and began to read. The letter claimed that Emma had broken neighborhood rules by drawing unsightly art on the driveway with chalk. The HOA warned that if such behavior continued, further action would be taken. John rubbed his forehead in disbelief. "Unsightly art," he whispered. His daughter's colorful flowers, rainbows, and American flags drawn in chalk were what made the driveway warm and alive. They weren't permanent. They washed away with the rain. When Emma came downstairs, still in her pajamas, she noticed the letter in his hand. "Dad, what's wrong?" she asked, brushing her blonde hair from her face. John smiled, trying to stay calm. "Nothing you need to worry about, sweetheart. Just someone who doesn't know what real beauty is." He tucked the paper into his pocket. But inside, his Marine blood boiled. Later that day, John went to the HOA office at the community center. The place smelled of fresh paint and polished wood. Behind the desk sat Mr. Anderson, the HOA president, a tall man with sharp glasses and a stiff suit. "Mr. Miller," Anderson said, without a smile. "We received multiple complaints about your daughter's chalk drawings. This neighborhood has standards, and rules must be followed." John leaned forward, his voice calm but firm. "My daughter isn't damaging anything. She's just being a child. Chalk isn't permanent. Rain washes it away." Anderson cleared his throat. "It sets a bad image. This is not a playground, it's a private community. If violations continue, we may have to involve law enforcement." John froze. Did he really just say that? "You're talking about police, for a little girl drawing flowers." "Rules are rules, Mr. Miller," Anderson said coldly. That night, John sat on the porch, staring at the stars. He remembered nights overseas, lying on sand with his fellow Marines, dreaming of home. He had fought for freedom, for peace, for children like Emma to grow up safe. And now, here he was, being threatened over sidewalk chalk. Emma came outside with 2 mugs of hot cocoa. She handed one to him, her eyes bright with innocence. "Dad, did I do something wrong?" she asked softly. John looked at her and felt his chest tighten. She should never have to ask that question for simply being herself. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did nothing wrong, Emma. You keep drawing, you keep being you. I'll handle the rest." Days passed, and Emma continued to draw. Butterflies, flags, flowers, even a picture of Martin Luther King Jr. that she copied from her history book. Neighbors smiled when they walked by, Children from down the street joined in, and soon the driveway was full of colors and laughter. But Anderson was not pleased. Another letter came. Then another. Each one colder than the last. Finally, on a quiet Saturday morning, something happened that John would never forget. Emma was outside with her chalks, drawing a large American flag. She was humming a song she liked, her hands smudged with red and blue dust. Then two police cars rolled slowly into the street. The lights weren't flashing, but the sight was enough to draw every neighbor out of their homes. The cars stopped right in front of John's house. Emma dropped the chalk and froze. The officers stepped out, one tall with dark hair, the other younger with a kind face. The tall one spoke first. "Mr. Miller." John stood tall on the porch, his marine posture straight as ever. "That's me. We received a call from the HOA. They claim there's a violation here involving your daughter." Gasps echoed from the neighbors watching. Mrs. Carter shook her head, whispering, "This is nonsense." John's eyes darkened. He stepped forward slowly, placing himself between the officers and his daughter. His voice was steady, every word clear. "My daughter is not a criminal. She is a child drawing on her own driveway. If you're here to arrest her, then you'll have to go through me first." The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The younger one lowered his voice. "Sir, we don't want any trouble. We just have to check on the complaint." Behind him, Emma whispered, "Dad," her small hand tugged at his sleeve. John placed his hand over hers without looking back. His eyes stayed locked on the officers. Years of discipline, years of service, years of protecting others had all prepared him for this moment. "I fought for this country," he said quietly, but firmly. "I know what freedom means. And no one, no board, no HOA, not even you will take that from my little girl." The crowd grew larger. Neighbors stood closer, whispering in support. One man even pulled out his phone to record. The officers seemed unsure now, caught between the letter of a complaint and the spirit of justice. Anderson himself appeared at the edge of the street, his arms crossed, watching coldly. He didn't expect resistance. He didn't expect a Marine who would not back down. Emma clutched her father's hand tighter. Her eyes were wide, but she felt safe. Because no matter what happened next, she knew one thing: her dad would protect her, always. And in that moment, John Miller realized this fight was bigger than chalk. It was about standing up against fear, control, and unfairness. And he was ready for it. The warm sun fell across the street as neighbors stood silently, watching the strange scene unfold. Two police officers stood near their cars, caught between duty and doubt. Emma's chalk drawing of the American flag stretched across the driveway, bright red and blue against the gray concrete. And there stood John Miller, tall, unshaken, his arm protectively around his daughter. Mr. Anderson, the HOA president, stepped forward from the crowd. His polished shoes clicked against the pavement, his voice sharp. "Officers, you see what I mean? This is repeated violation. This community has standards. If he refuses to cooperate, you must act." The taller officer, Officer Daniels, shifted uncomfortably. He glanced at John. "Sir, this is unusual. We don't typically handle issues like chalk drawings." Anderson raised his hand. "It's not about chalk. It's about rules. If every child does as they please, the neighborhood will fall apart." John's jaw tightened. He took one step forward. His voice was calm, but carried like thunder across the street. "Rules should protect families, not scare children. My daughter is not hurting anyone. She is making this place brighter. That's more than your letters and threats ever did. A ripple of murmurs ran through the neighbors. Some nodded. Others whispered. Mrs. Carter, the elderly neighbor Emma often helped, stepped closer. She's just a child, Anderson, she said firmly. That little girl has more kindness in her than you'll ever understand. Anderson's face reddened, but he turned his eyes back to the officers. Are you going to let him defy the HOA? Or will you do your job? The younger officer, Officer Lewis, looked down at Emma, who was clutching her father's hand. She was trembling but held her chin high. He cleared his throat. Mr. Miller, no one is here to arrest your daughter, he said softly. We just needed to respond to the complaint. That's all. John's eyes softened slightly. He gave a small nod but did not move away from Emma. That's good to hear. Because no child deserves to feel hunted in her own home. Anderson was not done. He pulled a folder from under his arm, flipping it open dramatically. The HOA has authority. If he won't respect warnings, then he should face penalties. We can fine him, we can. John interrupted. You can send your papers. You can mail your fines. But you will not threaten my daughter again. Not now, not ever. The Marine in him spoke with absolute finality. The neighbors clapped softly, then louder. A young father called out, let the girl draw. A mother added, she makes the street more beautiful. Soon, half the block was speaking in support. Emma looked around, wide-eyed, as the community rose for her. For the first time, she realized she wasn't alone. Later that evening, after the police left without incident, John sat on the porch again. The crowd had gone home, but the voices of support still echoed in his heart. He stared at the sunset painting the sky orange and pink. Emma came out, still holding a piece of chalk in her hand. Dad, am I in trouble? She asked quietly. John turned to her, smiling faintly. No, sweetheart. You're brave. Today, you showed strength without even knowing it. She leaned her head against his arm. But Mr. Anderson looked so angry. What if he makes the police come back? John wrapped his arm around her shoulder. Then we'll stand again. You know why? Why? Because Marines don't back down. And because you, Emma, are worth standing for. Her lips curved into a small smile. Like you stood for people when you were a Marine. He nodded. Exactly. Different place, same reason to protect what matters. That night, John couldn't sleep. He walked through the house, memories of his service flashing in his mind. The faces of friends he lost, the battles fought, the oaths made. He thought of the times he stood guard so that others could live free. Now, freedom was being questioned right on his driveway. It almost seemed absurd, but to him, it mattered just as much. He looked at an old photo on the wall. It showed him in uniform, standing beside General Colin Powell during a ceremony years ago. He remembered Powell's words, leadership is solving problems. Don't fight the people. Fight the problem. Those words struck him again. Maybe this wasn't only about chalk. Maybe this was about something deeper, about fear, about control, about people forgetting what community really meant. John made a decision. Tomorrow, he would not just defend Emma. He would speak up for every family tired of being pushed around. The next morning, John walked Emma to school. She waved goodbye, her backpack bouncing as she ran inside. John stood for a moment, proud of her courage. Then he drove to the community center. The HOA meeting was already in session when he arrived. The room smelled of coffee and paperwork. Men and women sat around a long table, Anderson at the head, shuffling his papers like a judge about to deliver a sentence. When John entered, the room fell quiet. Every pair of eyes turned toward him. Anderson adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Miller, this is not the place." John raised his hand, his voice steady. "With respect, it is exactly the place. You've made my daughter the center of this so-called violation. Now I'm here to speak." Some board members exchanged uneasy glances. A woman on the left spoke softly, "Let him talk, Robert." John walked to the center of the room. He stood straight, the way Marines do, his presence filling the space. "You all know me. I moved here to give my daughter a safe, happy life. She isn't destroying property. She isn't hurting anyone. She's drawing chalk that washes away. Yet you send letters, threats, even police." His voice deepened. "Do you know what message that sends to a child? It tells her that creativity is wrong. That kindness is wrong. That being a child is a crime." The room was silent. John continued, his tone softer but firm. "I served this country so that children could grow up free. And I'll be honest, I never thought the fight for freedom would happen in a small neighborhood like this. But here we are. And I will not back down. Not for fines, not for threats, not for anyone." Some members nodded slightly. The woman on the left spoke again. "Maybe we need to reconsider how we handle these things." Anderson slammed his hand on the table. "This is nonsense. If we allow one exception, rules mean nothing. Next, someone will paint graffiti, plant wild gardens, hang laundry in plain sight." John turned to him calmly. "There's a difference between chaos and community. Rules should guide us, not chain us. When they hurt children, they lose their purpose." The silence that followed was louder than shouting. That evening, as John returned home, Emma was waiting on the porch. She held out a new chalk drawing, a picture of her and her dad standing together under a rainbow. "I made this for you," she said shyly. John knelt down, tears warming his eyes. "This is the best gift I've ever received." He hugged her close, knowing the battle wasn't over, but also knowing they had already won something bigger: courage, unity, and truth. And somewhere inside him, he felt the Marine spirit rising again. This was only the beginning. The days after the HOA meeting were tense. Some neighbors waved at John with new respect, while others avoided eye contact, afraid of being caught in the middle. Children continued to sneak over to Emma's driveway after school, eager to join her chalk adventures. The bright drawings of flowers, flags, and smiling faces turned the gray concrete into a gallery of joy. But Anderson grew colder. New letters appeared on John's door. Threats of fines grew larger. The words "further action" were written more than once. John read every letter in silence, then folded it carefully and placed it in a box. He wasn't going to let paper threats scare him. He had faced storms, deserts, and battlefields. A man in a suit with rules on a page was not going to break him. Still, the pressure weighed on him. At night, when Emma was asleep, he sat alone at the kitchen table. He thought of the Marines he served with, brave men like Chris Kyle, who gave everything for freedom, and leaders like Colin Powell, who taught that strength and wisdom must go together. He remembered training days, standing in the hot sun with sweat running down his back, his drill instructor shouting, "Stand tall, Marine. You fight for more than yourself." Those words echoed in his mind now. He wasn't just standing for Emma anymore. He was standing for every family who felt small against people in power. One morning, John received a knock on the door. It was Mrs. Carter, holding a plate of homemade cookies. Her gray hair was pulled back, and her eyes were kind. "John, may I come in?" she asked softly. He welcomed her, and they sat at the kitchen table. She placed the cookies between them. "I've lived here for 30 years, she said. "And I've seen Anderson push people out with his strict ways. Families moved away because of the pressure. But you," her eyes sparkled. "You didn't bow down. You reminded us of courage." John looked down, humbled. "I just want Emma to feel safe. That's all." Mrs. Carter touched his hand gently. "You've started something bigger. People talk about it. Some of us want to support you, but we're afraid. The HOA fines are heavy. Some are afraid of losing their homes." John's Marine heart stirred. Fear, that was Anderson's weapon. But he had learned long ago that fear loses its power when people stand together. "Mrs. Carter," he said firmly, "no one should be afraid of chalk drawings or unfair rules. If neighbors want to speak, I'll stand with them. I won't let anyone face this alone." That weekend, John decided to take action. He organized a small gathering at his home. He invited neighbors quietly, telling them it was not about breaking rules, but about sharing voices. By Saturday evening, his yard was filled with people holding lawn chairs, cups of lemonade, and curious eyes. Emma sat on the porch with her chalk box, watching with excitement. John stood tall at the center. "Thank you all for coming," he began. His voice carried the calm power of someone used to speaking in the field. "I know some of you are nervous. I know the HOA can feel like a wall that cannot be moved. But I'm here to tell you walls fall when people stand together." The crowd listened silently. "I didn't serve this country to come home and bow to fear. I served because I believed in freedom, in fairness, in community. And now, right here in this neighborhood, I see that same fight. It's not with weapons. It's not with anger. It's with truth. And truth says children should not be threatened for being children." A cheer rose from the crowd. Mrs. Carter clapped first, then others joined. A father named Mike stepped forward. "My son was warned for leaving his basketball hoop near the street. They made him feel guilty for playing. I was scared to say anything, but you're right, John. Enough is enough." Another mother added, "They fined us for planting sunflowers in the front yard." "Sunflowers?" my little girl cried when they made us cut them down." Voices grew louder. Story after story poured out small rules, big punishments, families living in quiet fear. John raised his hand. "This is why we need to stand. Not just for chalk, but for all of us. Anderson has forgotten what community means. But together, we can remind him." The neighbors nodded. Some looked braver than before. It was the start of something new. News of the gathering spread quickly. A local reporter heard about the Marine who stood against the HOA and called John for an interview. At first, he hesitated. He didn't want to make Emma nervous. But when she looked at him with bright eyes and said, "Dad, maybe people need to hear," he agreed. A week later, John sat on his porch while a reporter from a local TV station asked questions. The camera captured his steady face, Emma's colorful chalk drawings behind him. "What do you hope to achieve, Mr. Miller?" the reporter asked. John answered simply, I hope my daughter grows up in a place where children are not silenced. Where neighbors feel like family, not prisoners. That's what I fought for. That's what I'll keep fighting for." The story aired that evening. Soon, people outside the neighborhood were talking. Letters of support came in. Veterans from nearby towns reached out, saying they stood with him. One even said, "Semper Fi, brother. Keep the line." Anderson, however, was furious. At the next HOA meeting, his voice thundered across the room. "This is out of control. He is turning neighbors against the board. He is bringing cameras into our community." But the board members were no longer silent. The woman who had defended John earlier spoke again. "Robert, maybe we are too strict. Maybe the community needs a softer hand. Look around, people are unhappy. We cannot ignore that." Anderson's face tightened. "You're being fooled by his speeches. He's dangerous." John, standing in the back of the room, stepped forward calmly. "Dangerous is a word for war, not for chalk. I am not your enemy, Anderson. But I will not let you harm this community with fear." The board murmured. Something was shifting. Anderson no longer looked untouchable. That night, Emma sat at the table, working on homework. She looked up at her father with curiosity. "Dad, why do you keep fighting, even when it's so hard?" she asked. John smiled gently. "Because freedom is never free. Someone always has to stand up for it. And right now, that someone is me." She tilted her head. "Does it make you tired?" He laughed softly. "Sometimes. But when I see you smile, when I see you draw, it gives me strength." Emma thought for a moment, then said, "Then I'll keep drawing. That will give you even more strength." John's heart swelled with pride. "Deal." As the days passed, support grew. More neighbors spoke up. The local paper printed John's story. Even a few veterans groups called, offering help if needed. John could feel the tide turning. The Marine in him recognized it the moment when fear starts to fade, and hope begins to rise. But he also knew Anderson would not step back quietly. A man who ruled by fear would not surrender without one more push. John stood on his porch that evening, watching Emma finish her newest masterpiece, a chalk eagle soaring above a rainbow. He placed his hand over his heart. "Semper Fi," he whispered to himself. Always faithful. Always ready. The real battle was yet to come. The morning sun shined softly on the neighborhood as John stepped outside with a cup of coffee. The driveway was covered in Emma's latest masterpiece, a chalk mural of the Statue of Liberty holding a bright torch. She had drawn it after hearing her father talk about freedom again the night before. Emma skipped down the porch steps, her ponytail bouncing. "Do you like it, Dad?" John knelt beside her, his voice full of pride. "It's perfect. Lady Liberty has never looked stronger." Emma grinned. "I want everyone to remember freedom." Her simple words struck John deeply. A 12-year-old child, reminding the world of what mattered most. News of John's stand had spread far beyond the neighborhood. The local TV station's story was shared online. Soon, emails and letters arrived from across the state, parents, teachers, veterans, even college students, all sending encouragement. One letter came from a veteran in Texas. It read, "Brother, I fought in the Marines too. Watching you stand for your daughter reminds me of why we served. Don't stop. You're carrying all of us with you." Another came from a schoolteacher, "Tell Emma her drawings are beautiful. She inspires my students, and they've started a chalk art project here in her honor. Emma blushed when John read that one aloud. Dad, they really like my drawings. He smiled warmly. They love them, sweetheart. You're touching people you've never even met. But Anderson grew more restless. He doubled the fines, sending thicker envelopes stuffed with warnings. He called special meetings, declaring that John was destroying the order of the community. Still, more neighbors stood with John. Families who once kept quiet now spoke up. At night, people gathered on John's lawn to share lemonade and talk. Children played together, chalk in hand, filling the sidewalks with color. The neighborhood, once quiet and stiff, was alive again. Laughter echoed. Hope returned. Anderson hated it. One Saturday morning, as John worked on fixing the fence, a black SUV pulled up. Out stepped a tall man with a familiar face, Marcus Allen, a retired NFL star who lived just a few miles away. John wiped his hands and greeted him with surprise. Marcus, what brings you here? The athlete shook his hand firmly. I saw your story on the news. I've got kids too. And let me tell you, no board should scare children for being children. I came to say I stand with you. Emma peeked out from behind her dad, her eyes wide. You're Marcus Allen. You played football. Marcus laughed. That's right. And I think your chalk art is better than anything I ever did on the field. Emma beamed. The neighbors gathered quickly when they saw who had arrived. Phones clicked, photos were taken, but Marcus kept his words simple. Freedom is for families. Creativity is for kids. And when a Marine says he won't back down, we stand with him. The crowd cheered. Emma clapped the loudest. Days later, even more support poured in. A local church invited John to speak at their Sunday service. A group of veterans offered to attend the next HOA meeting with him. One evening, while sitting at the dinner table, John received a call. The deep voice on the other end introduced himself. This is General James Mattis. John froze for a moment. General Mattis. Yes, the voice confirmed. I read about you. You're a Marine standing for what's right, and I respect that. Remember this, Marine battles are not always on foreign soil. Sometimes they're right at home. Stay steady. Stay faithful. John's eyes watered as he whispered, "Thank you, sir." Emma looked up from her plate. Who was that, Dad? John smiled gently. A friend reminding me we're not alone. The HOA board felt the pressure. At the next meeting, the room was packed. Veterans in caps, families with children, even the local news showed up. John entered calmly with Emma at his side. Anderson slammed his gavel. This meeting is about violations and order. Mr. Miller is turning this community into a circus. Before John could answer, a veteran stood from the crowd. His voice carried like thunder. This man is a Marine who served our country. And you're attacking his daughter over chalk. Shame on you. The room erupted in applause. Anderson's face turned red. This is not about service. This is about rules. Another neighbor rose. Then your rules are broken. We want community, not fear. The board members shifted uneasily. Some avoided Anderson's glare. Others nodded quietly in agreement. John finally stepped forward. His voice was calm, but his presence filled the room. I am not here to fight neighbors. I am here to protect them. My daughter is not a criminal. She is an artist, a child, a reminder of what we've forgotten, that community means kindness, not control. You can write all the fines you want, but you will never erase that truth. The room burst into cheers again. Emma squeezed her dad's hand, proud and brave. That night, back at home, Emma sat with her chalks again. She began a new drawing on the driveway, this time of an eagle flying over the words "We are free." John sat beside her, his hand resting on his knee, watching her work with focus and joy. "Dad," Emma asked suddenly, "why do so many people care now?" He thought for a moment. "Because courage spreads. When one person stands, it gives others the strength to stand too." She tilted her head. "Like when you were in the Marines." "Yes," he said softly. "On the battlefield, one Marine standing strong gave courage to the whole unit. Out here, it's the same. You stood with your chalk. I stood with you. And now, look, the whole neighborhood is standing." Emma smiled. "Then I'll keep drawing until everyone remembers." John chuckled. "That's my girl." Later that evening, as the stars came out, John stood alone on the porch. He could hear the voices of neighbors talking happily, children laughing, the soft scratch of chalk on sidewalks. For the first time since the letters began, the air felt light again. But he knew the fight wasn't finished. Anderson would not step down quietly. Still, John felt no fear. He felt the strength of the Marine Corps, the spirit of his brothers, the faith of his neighbors, and the love of his daughter. He whispered the words that carried him through every storm, every battle: Semper Fi. Always faithful. The war was not over, but the tide had turned. And this time, the Marine was not standing alone. The days following the crowded HOA meeting were like a storm before calm. The neighborhood buzzed with conversation. Some spoke with pride about John's words, others whispered nervously about Anderson's anger. But the spirit of unity was alive. Children continued chalk art along the sidewalks, parents smiled more openly, and laughter filled the air again. John watched it all quietly. He didn't want fame. He didn't want cameras or attention. He wanted one thing: for his daughter to feel safe. But Anderson was not ready to let go. A week later, another letter appeared on John's door. This one was heavier, official looking. Across the top, it read, "Final notice, legal action pending." John sighed as he read the words. Anderson had taken it further now, threatening court. He folded the letter neatly and placed it in the box with all the others. His Marine training told him one thing: stay calm, stay steady. That evening, he sat with Emma on the porch as she colored a giant chalk heart across the driveway. Inside the heart, she wrote in bright yellow letters, "Love wins." She looked up at him. "Dad, is Mr. Anderson going to stop us?" John smiled softly. "No, sweetheart. He may try, but love is stronger than fear. And when people stand together, fear has no chance." The next HOA meeting was different. The room was packed again, but this time the air felt heavy, like something important was about to happen. Reporters sat in the back, neighbors filled every chair, and veterans stood along the walls in quiet support. Anderson slammed his gavel. "We have serious business tonight. Mr. Miller has violated rules repeatedly and refuses to comply. We will vote on legal action." The crowd shifted, whispers spreading quickly. John stood slowly, his shoulders straight, his Marine discipline clear. Emma sat in the front row beside Mrs. Carter, her small hands folded tightly in her lap. "Before you vote," John said calmly, "let me speak one last time." Anderson opened his mouth to object, but the other board members nodded, and the room quieted. John stepped forward, his voice clear and steady. "I've received your letters. I've seen your fines. And now I see your threats of court. But let me tell you something, Anderson, I've faced bigger threats than you. I've stood on battlefields where fear was real. And yet, I never backed down. Not then, not now." The room held its breath. "My daughter is 12 years old. She draws with chalk. She smiles at neighbors. She helps the elderly. And you," John turned his gaze directly at Anderson, "you sent police to her doorstep. You tried to make her afraid in her own home." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she listened, but she sat tall, proud of her father. John continued, his tone softer now. "I don't stand here for myself. I stand here for every family who felt small, every child who was silenced, every neighbor who was fined for living free. Rules are supposed to protect us, not punish us." The silence was deep, heavy with truth. Finally, he lifted his chin. "You can vote however you want. But I will not pay a fine for my daughter's laughter. I will not bow to fear. And I will never stop protecting what matters most." That's not just a Marine's promise. That's a father's promise. The room erupted in applause. Neighbors stood, clapping loudly, some even cheering. Veterans raised their hands in salute. Emma's face glowed with pride. Anderson banged his gavel angrily. "Order. This is out of control." But something had shifted. One board member cleared her throat. "Mr. Anderson, we cannot continue like this. The people have spoken. The neighborhood is not happy with these rules." Another member added, "This has gone too far. We look like bullies. It's time for change." Anderson's face turned pale. He tried to argue, but the voices of the board and the cheers of the community drowned him out. The vote was quick. By a wide margin, the board decided to withdraw all fines and end any legal action against John and Emma. Cheers filled the room. Neighbors hugged each other, children laughed, and Emma ran into her father's arms. "You did it, Dad," she cried, her voice muffled against his chest. John kissed the top of her head, holding her close. "No, sweetheart. We did it. All of us." The following week, the neighborhood looked different. Sidewalks were alive with chalk drawings, flowers, flags, hearts, and rainbows. Families waved at each other more warmly, children played together freely. Anderson eventually stepped down as HOA president, his power broken by the unity of the people. A new board was elected, one that promised fairness and kindness. Emma's drawings became a symbol of change. Local papers called her the chalk girl who reminded a neighborhood of freedom. Teachers invited her to speak about creativity. Veterans groups honored John for standing tall once more, this time not in uniform, but as a father. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low, John sat on the porch watching Emma draw again. She was making a giant eagle, wings spread wide, soaring above the words, "Always free." She looked up at him, her cheeks smudged with chalk dust. "Do you think people will remember this, Dad?" John smiled, his voice warm. "They'll remember forever. Because you showed them the power of innocence. And we showed them the power of standing together." Emma grinned. "Then I'll never stop drawing." He chuckled. "And I'll never stop protecting you." They sat in silence for a while, the sound of crickets filling the air, the driveway glowing with color under the fading sun. John thought about his journey from a Marine in faraway lands to a father on a suburban driveway. The battles were different, but the mission was the same: to defend freedom, to protect family, to stand for what was right. He whispered the words that had guided him through every trial: Semper Fi. Always faithful. This time, he wasn't just saying it for the Corps. He was saying it for Emma, for the neighbors, for every person who believed that love and courage could overcome fear. And as the stars appeared above, John knew the fight was over. Not with anger. Not with defeat. But with unity, with justice, with the simple strength of a Marine who refused to back down.